What's up, my people? If you are tired of having your houseplants die or you just want to take care of them better, this video is for you. By the end of it, you're going to know 7 genius tips to help your houseplants not just survive, but thrive. So if you want healthy, thriving plants throughout your home, I'm going to show you how to make that happen. But I do got to warn you, the last tip is by far the most important, so please don't skip it. Alright, so tip 1 is that the location and the amount of light the plant is in matters immensely. Alright, so location is everything when it comes to houseplants. If you bring home a new plant and just put it wherever you think it's going to look good and don't consider how much light that specific type of plant needs, you're going to be immediately putting yourself at a huge disadvantage. And the chances of that plant doing well and looking good for a long time are very slim. You know, if you have something like a peace lily or a Chinese evergreen, sure, put them anywhere and they'll probably be just fine. Those are 2 types of houseplants that don't need a lot of light. But those plants are definitely uncommon. The majority of popular houseplants people are going to be buying are going to need to at least be close to a window to be getting, you know, some indirect light at least. But others are going to need to be in a window that gets direct light. So before you just throw your brand new houseplant wherever you feel like it, wherever it's going to look good, Google how much light that specific plant needs and try to put it in a spot that will allow it to do well. But even if you do have your plants in the perfect amount of light, if you don't have them in good soil, you're still going to be putting them at risk of dying quickly. So here's a great tip for fixing that. All right, so tip 2 is that soil quality is very important. Depending on where you buy your houseplants, there's a strong chance they're not going to be in the greatest soil. If you get them from one of the big box stores like Home Depot or Lowe's, they're almost certainly going to be in the cheapest soil that company can possibly find. So, you know, places like that are selling such a high volume of plants that they definitely do not care at all about the quality of the soil. That's why you'll see a lot of plants at Home Depot or Lowe's, these types of places, that if they've been sitting around for a month or even just a couple weeks there, they're going to almost certainly look half dead and really look terrible. And if you leave your plant in that same soil, that's exactly how your plant is going to look after a few months. So even if you buy your plants from a nicer, like more expensive plant store, there's still a good chance that the soil is not great. Anywhere basically that's selling hundreds of plants per month, they're going to want to try to save money on soil. And even if they're not using the worst possible soil like Home Depot or places like that, they're also almost definitely not using the best soil. Which is what you want to do if you want to give your houseplants the best chance to thrive and to grow huge. And I've noticed recently that a lot of the growers are growing their plants in pure coco coir, which is not a practical long-term solution. So if you get a plant that's in coco, you're going to need to transplant them ASAP. And if you don't know what the coco coir looks like, I'll show you here. But it's basically like coconut, I think it's like coconut husks that are ground up. So it's good for growing plants cheaply and growing plants hydroponically, but for houseplants, it's not going to work long term. And so in my opinion, the highest quality soil you can use for your houseplants is Fox Farm Happy Frog. Fox Farm is a company that's been around for decades and they know what they're doing. This is the only soil that I would ever use for my houseplants and that I would ever recommend anyone use for their houseplants. It is expensive, but it's totally worth every dollar. If your houseplants are going to be living in just that small pot and that small little bit of soil for many years, it's totally worth it to spend a little bit of money on the soil. But even if you transplant your plants into Happy Frog right away, you know, Happy Frog or some other kind of high-end soil, you're still going to need to make sure that you're watering them correctly. Or it's more than likely that you'll still end up killing them sooner rather than later. So, tip 3, that brings us to tip 3, which is to water your plants correctly. When we talk about how to water houseplants correctly, there are really two factors that we need to consider. It's not just how often we water them, but it's how much water we use when we do water them. So for the vast majority of all houseplants, there's a general rule that I like to stick to, and that's to water them once every 2 weeks and to completely soak the soil when you do water them. There are, of course, a few exceptions to this. Snake plants, ZZ plants, obviously cactuses. Something like a snake plant, you'll want to water at most once a month. But for most plants, sticking to the schedule of once every 2 weeks is the way to go. So rather than trying to, stick your finger into the soil or judge how wet the soil is by eye or by some other kind of method, I think it's better just stick to a schedule. Just stick to that strict schedule. Just say, okay, I'll water my plants every other Sunday or every other Tuesday, something along those lines. Just stick to that. And it's going to take the guesswork out of it. And I think you'll find that almost all indoor plants will respond well to this. So just stick to that bi-weekly watering schedule. And also, just using a cup or two of water is not going to cut it. You want to make sure you're soaking the roots all the way down to the bottom. But there is a catch. You also don't want to make sure that you're putting so much water in that the plant is then sitting in water for several days. So I think the ideal amount of water is just enough water that it kind of starts to come out of the bottom of the pot just a little bit. If they're sitting in water for a day or two and then absorb the water up after a couple days, that's okay and that's good. But if it's sitting in water for more than a couple days, it's going to lead to root rot, which you definitely want to avoid at all costs. And so a good way to find out exactly how much water a plant needs is to pour water in very slowly the first few times that you water the plant. If you dump in all the water, very quickly all at once, it's going to immediately just spill out the bottom. It's going to go right through. But if you slowly pour like half of the water that you think you'll need and come back and slowly pour the rest, it's going to give the soil time to fully absorb the water. So if you have a bunch of plants, you can maybe just water them all half of what you think you're going to do, go around, do them all, and then come back and finish them. So basically when you're doing the second half of the watering, as soon as you start to see the water come out the bottom, then you stop. And so once you've done this a couple of times, you'll get a feel for just exactly how much water the plant needs, and then then you won't need to do it so slowly every single time. But if you do tend to overwater your plants and you need to give them a chance to dry out every once in a while, I have another tip that will help you with that. So this brings us to tip 4, which is to always leave the plants in the plastic pot that they come in. So when you buy a houseplant from a store, it's almost certainly going to come in a plastic pot. And a lot of people like to transplant the plant directly into terracotta or some other decorative pot, but I think this is actually a bad move. I personally always leave my plants in the plastic pot, and I just set that plastic pot into the decorative pot that I want to keep them in so it looks nice. If you do this, basically it makes it a lot easier to move them around. And if you tend to overwater them every once in a while, you can take the plant outside to let it air out. So if you often see your plant sitting in water after you water it and it's still in the plastic pot, then every month or couple of months you can take it outside for a day or two and just let it dry out. But if it's potted directly into some heavy decorative pot, it's going to be way more of a hassle to move it. So rather than trying to lug around this heavy pot with the soil and the plant directly in it, if it's still in the plastic pot, you can move it around much more easily. You can move it outside, or at least move it into a sunnier spot in your house. And it will also make it way easier to just move the plant around in general. If you want to switch the pot that it's in, if you get a new one, or just move it to a different spot, just makes it easier to move it. So I think this is the way to go. I recommend just always leaving it in a plastic pot. And if your plant is starting to get big and you need to transplant it and repot it, I would still just repot it into a bigger plastic pot, and it will save you a lot of trouble down the road. But even if you followed all these tips so far, you're still going to have a lot of trouble keeping your plants alive if you don't know what level of humidity that they need. So tip 5, humidity matters. So for some plants, the humidity inside your home is not going to play a huge factor. But for some others, keeping them in a humid environment is going to be absolutely essential. Okay, so things like palms, calatheas, anthuriums, and especially ferns, most of all, need high humidity. If you keep them in a dry area, especially if they're near a heating or AC vent or a fan and they're getting air on them all the time, they're going to quickly dry out and they're going to quickly die. So that's why some of these types of plants will make perfect bathroom plants. So if you have a window in your bathroom, that's perfect for these types of plants. The humidity created by the shower will keep them in the perfect environment. But if you don't have a good spot near your shower, don't worry, there are other ways to keep the humidity up. If you have a lot of these plants that need higher humidity, I think it's a good idea to just kind of group them all together and invest in a humidifier. So you can get a humidifier, put all those plants together in one spot, and then just keep that humidifier running, quite often. But if you don't have a humidifier, that's okay too. Just need to mist them down with a spray bottle every couple of days. Just get the leaves wet and that will work as well. All right, but even if you're doing everything right in terms of your plant care, you still need to watch out for bugs. A bug infestation can come out of nowhere and it can easily kill all of your plants in no time. So that brings us to tip 6, which is to preemptively treat for bugs. All right, so even the most experienced plant experts know that dealing with bugs on your plants is no joke. Some of the bugs that can get onto houseplants, like spider mites, they can often get out of control before you even realize they're there. And they won't just infest one plant. If you don't notice a bug problem right away, they can quickly spread to all of your plants. And you'll be at risk of not losing just one plant, but losing most or even all of your plants. Okay, so that's not good, obviously. But there is a way to prevent this from happening in the first place. So rather than wait until you see bugs to treat the plants for them, just make it part of your routine to treat them preemptively. Okay, so I like to spray my plants down with neem oil or even just a little mixture of Dawn dish soap and water, every month or every couple of months. And this will keep bugs from getting onto your plants in the first place. But if you want to be really sure that no bugs get onto your houseplants, then you can get a systemic pesticide that you mix into the soil. It's normally like a granular thing. I think they do have even a liquid one now that I've seen. But basically, you'll put it into the soil and the plants will absorb the pesticide and it will make them toxic to bugs. So the bugs won't even go for it in the first place. And you just need to reapply it every couple months, and then you'll never have to worry about losing all your houseplants to spider mites or scale or whitefly or any of these super annoying bugs that can kill all of your plants very quickly. So I would highly recommend doing this. And that brings us to the most important tip of all, guys. All right, so all these things are very important, but I think there's something that you need to do most of all to keep your plants looking good, and that's going to help more than any of these things and will cause your plants to be healthy even if you neglect a few of these things. So that is tip 7, which is to fertilize your houseplants every month. Okay, so I have a ton of houseplants, and for me, this has been the biggest game changer in being able to keep them not just alive, but super healthy. So I fertilize my plants all the time. If a plant hasn't been fertilized ever, it'll be quickly affected by any sort of negative conditions, whether it's too much water, not enough humidity, poor soil, bug problems, whatever it may be. But if you haven't fertilized them, it will just take a couple of months before your plant will die due to whatever issues may be affecting them. But if you fertilize them regularly, it will take a lot longer for them to be damaged at all. If plants have the proper nutrients that they need to be healthy, then they can endure any negative conditions for months before they even start to look bad at all. So if you just fertilize them, it will take a lot of pressure off of you to do everything else perfectly. I keep my plants on a monthly fertilization schedule all year round. I water the majority of my plants, like I've said, every 2 weeks. And so I just add some liquid fertilizer into the water every second watering. And this has made all the difference in the world for my plants. It makes it way easier to not just keep them alive, but keep them looking good, and it will also help them to just grow big as quickly as possible. So I can not recommend this tip enough. It's an absolute game changer. But you also can't just use any fertilizer. I would strongly recommend staying away from Miracle-Gro or these other cheap kind of synthetic fertilizers. These kind of fertilizers will actually degrade the soil over time, and it will strip any nutrients or beneficial microbes that's in the soil, and it will kill the soil over time. And it will, people think using Miracle-Gro will help your plant, and it might help for a couple months, but over time it will actually negatively affect the plant, and it will eventually kill it. And I've seen this happen. So when it comes to houseplants, I always use an organic liquid fertilizer. And if you use an organic fertilizer, it will actually improve the health of the soil over time and give your plants the best possible chance of staying alive for many years to come. If you've seen my other videos, you know there are 2 fertilizers that I personally think are the best. And that is the Microlife Biomatrix and the Fox Farm Grow Big. In my opinion, these are the 2 best fertilizers on the market, and you can buy them at a lot of plant shops, and you can find them on Amazon as well. So they're easy to use. You just add a little bit into the water every other watering, and you'll quickly see that it makes an enormous difference in the health of your plants. It's really that easy. It's a simple trick, but it's absolutely the biggest factor in keeping your plants alive and looking beautiful. So if you've been avoiding fertilizing your plants, believe me, it's worth it. It's really easy. You just add a little bit into the water, and that's it. So there you go. Those are the 7 genius tips to keep your plants alive. And I think if you follow all of these, you're going to see enormous difference in the health of your plants. Just follow these 7 tips, and you're going to have a jungle in your home in no time. Your home's gonna be looking like a nursery with how all your plants are looking. It's gonna be a jungle in there. So please, please, please subscribe to my channel, like the video, and I'm gonna be back more with many, many videos to come. So thank you, my people. Love you guys very much. I'll be back soon.